The measure of a man is what he does with power. Plato said this, knowing that a man's character is truly what constitutes his will. Many men fall prey to desire and lust, and grow impatient when other forms of power keep them from what they want. The concept of masculine character has been a key focus of video game protagonists since the advent of largely violent power fantasies in the medium. What men do with power is largely a concept that grew the video game industry into a male-dominated space over the last several decades. And one of the franchises that capitalized on creating a more immersive look into this space was the Assassin's Creed franchise. Now, many games have created a context of conflict resolved by violence, and have even done it in a more realistic historical context, but none contextualized a narrative of a man's role in history quite like these games did at the time of release. We had philosophical explorations of the male role in war games like Halo, Gears of War, and Call of Duty. We had men facing internal trauma, like in games like Silent Hill 2. There were many games creating a role for men in the context of a conflict, but not as many asking why men are attracted towards the heroic journey. Assassin's Creed 1 is a brilliant game in this way, because the whole game is about a man's growth. Altaïr is the summary of maturity, from a reckless man of passion to a man who understands that actions have consequences, and that personal conviction plays a huge role in shaping what ideas craft a society. In this essay, I want to look closely at the steps that Altaïr takes on this journey to mold him from a prideful boy to a responsible man, and where that responsibility ultimately leads his character. Our first introduction to Altaïr, after Desmond enters the memories, is the voice of Malik, Altaïr's fellow assassin, calling out,
"Wait! There must be another way. This one need not die."
Altaïr then jumps onto a man in frame and stabs him to death with his hidden blade. Right from the introduction of the main character's actions, we see what kind of a man we are dealing with. Brash, proud, and willing to take action without listening. This is confirmed by Altaïr's gloating about his skill when complimented by Malik's brother, who is another assassin en route with them. Where Altaïr is set up as impulsive, Malik is the established juxtaposition to Altaïr's immaturity. He always speaks rationally, considering the consequences of the actions in question. He also embodies the moral pillars of the creed the assassins are supposed to follow. The two tenets in this case being not to draw attention and not to take the lives of innocents. The man Altaïr killed was in the way of their path, but he was not a hostile enemy. Through just a few sentences spoken between the three men, we understand the entire premise of Altaïr's character and the growth he has room for. This speaks to the quality of character writing, and honestly sets the stage for most of the game's themes. However, this is a video about Altaïr's character, so I won't get too caught up in the game's narrative details. That can be another video altogether. This conversation is also the first time we hear the mantra of the Assassin Brotherhood. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. This will be the statement that will be the main focus of interpretation, not only in this game, but the franchise as a whole. How Altaïr interprets this one sentence is almost his entire arc as a character, and it is outlined for us right from the introduction of the game. Immediately after the 2 points of view are laid out, we come to Altaïr's first altercation in the game. The Templar leader, Robert des Sables, is spotted by the trio looking to take what appears to be the Ark of the Covenant out of Solomon's temple, the temple they have been traversing through. Malik is the voice of caution, telling Altaïr they should stay back and observe. But of course, Altaïr is eager to take the opportunity to attack one of the sworn enemy leaders of his brotherhood. Malik notes that this compromises the third tenet of the creed: do not compromise the other assassins. Malik tries to stop him, but Altaïr rushes in and is instantly stopped dead in his tracks by Robert. a towering giant of a man compared to our protagonist. He leaves Altaïr alive to tell his master that the Holy Land belongs to him and his conspirers, and to stand down or be destroyed. This sets up the primary goal for Altaïr: to stop and kill Robert de Sable. Altaïr is thrown down into an area where he has to climb his way out to freedom. Meanwhile, we hear Robert tell his men to kill the remaining 2 assassins. Immediately, we see consequences for Altaïr's worldview being put into action, and giving us a solid grasp of his flaws. We have seen how Altaïr is with his peers, but next we get to see him respond to authority. Altaïr heads back to Masyaf, the headquarters of the Brotherhood in Syria, and comes face to face with Al-Mu'allim, the leader of the assassins. When questioned about the mission, Altaïr admits his failure, and we learn that he is supposed to be the best of the assassins. This establishes that, while immature, he is generally a very skilled assassin, and has a position of prominence in his community. This gives us some insight into where his pride came from, but also shows us that this is his most prominent failure up to this point. We get to see our character's journey starting from his lowest point, and the icing on the cake is that Malik, who Altaïr assumed dead, comes in behind him with a badly injured arm, and rebukes Altaïr for his failures. Malik's brother was killed in the conflict, and he rightly blames Altaïr. And on top of that, Malik was able to bring back the artifact that they were searching for, that Altaïr had failed to. This is important because it shows us that Malik was not only a different perspective, but the one that was focused and rational enough to complete the mission. This establishes that he will be our voice of reason in the game, while Altaïr is still figuring out what is right. The conversation is cut short by an attack from Robert and his Templar forces. We then get to see the skills that Altaïr is supposed to have put into action, as he springs a trap that drives the Templar forces away. Altaïr is gathered in front of the Brotherhood and addressed by his leader once again. Al-Mu'allim, in a fatherly tone, reminds Altaïr that this time his success came from listening to instruction, but follows up this tone with a wrathful scolding. He recounts the arrogance that brought about his failure, and how disregarding the rules must have consequences. Al-Mu'allim makes a public example out of Altaïr by stabbing him in the gut, giving Altaïr a taste of the fear and suffering of Malik's brother and the men lost in the attack. Altaïr comes back to consciousness, standing before his master once again. This is foreshadowing for the power that we see more clearly in Al-Mu'allim's hands later, but for now, it is the beginning of Altaïr's journey of learning. Al-Mu'allim's first lesson to our reborn hero is that the assassins fight ultimately for peace, and not only physical peace, but inner, mental peace. He tells Altaïr that he lacks this peace within himself, and it makes his arrogance rise to prominence. Altaïr then brings up the mantra, "Nothing is true, everything is permitted." Al-Mu'allim reinterprets the phrase for him, telling him it doesn't mean you can do as you wish, but is supposed to guide the senses through wisdom and understanding. This idea is one of responsibility that comes with understanding the nuance in morality, and that actions are subjectively applied because of this. Altaïr is then given a chance to prove his worthiness to be back in the fold. He must find a traitor who conspired with the Templars and let them in to attack Masyaf. Altaïr finds the traitor and brings him before his master. Al-Mu'allim then offers forgiveness in exchange for admission of guilt from the traitor. Much like Altaïr, he is given a second chance to be loyal, but the traitor refuses to change his mind. The traitor is actually killed for his convictions, and this plants a seed for Altaïr and the audience, that despite consequences, there is always a choice to follow your convictions. This is a brilliant setup because on the one hand, we have a reason for our protagonist to mature, but we also establish that his individuality makes him able to decide where his moral duties belong. We then see the dogmatic side of Al-Mu'allim, as he talks about how people's wills can be controlled, unless their mind is corrupted with specific ideologies. This begins a dichotomy of individual free will versus identifying with a group in the mind of Altaïr. How can everything be permitted if there are rules? This search for the wisdom to make these choices is the journey of our main character, and he must find what he is looking for under the umbrella of being semi-controlled by this teacher. In this way, we have laid out that our prideful assassin must become the student once again, and as a student, undergo tests. Al-Mu'allim lays out 9 assassination contracts that must be completed in order to claim victory over Robert, and ensure that the Holy Land remains under the protection of the Assassin Brotherhood. These 9 assassination contracts are the tests for Altaïr, but the lessons might not be as morally simple as he is led to believe. Al-Mu'allim preaches that the destruction of these men will bring the peace he referred to earlier, and as a fresh, reborn assassin, that is Altaïr's new goal. It also channels his old goal, to kill de Sable, into a new context, a context of humility and obedience. Altaïr's first contract is a man named Tamir, who is located in Damascus. After traveling there, Altaïr must contact the local assassin heading the bureau there before seeking his target. This will be one of 3 personalities in the Brotherhood Altaïr must talk to in the 3 cities that the contracts take place in. This Rafiq, as they are called, is the most uninvested in Altaïr's character, and acts as an agreeable peer more than a mentor or wise figure. The best I can tell, he is meant to juxtapose the other 2 Rafiqs that actually might challenge or advise Altaïr in his mission of growth. I feel like he plays the role of showing what it means to be a blind follower in order to expose Altaïr's character growth at different points in his journey. At this point, Altaïr is in need of proving himself, so the exchange seems rather casual, like 2 co-workers talking about the agenda for the daily grind. Altaïr is still very much a dog on a leash, and this trained dog is ready to find his first target. Altaïr finds Tamir in an open market square, arguing with his weapons dealer about how the shipments are taking too long. After getting very mad about the dealer's excuses, he brutally stabs him repetitively to death in front of the entire marketplace. Tamir obviously doesn't take excuses as an acceptable response. Altaïr takes down his first target after a public battle with him, and engages in a final dialogue with Tamir before finishing him off. Altaïr accuses him of being a wartime profiteer, but Tamir says what he does is a collaborative effort for a noble cause, and that the others will not be happy with his death. Altaïr proudly explains that he will kill all of them as well. At Tamir's final breath, he rebukes Altaïr's arrogance, saying that it will be his downfall. Altaïr lays the man to rest, while getting to consider that this man acts out of conviction for his own beliefs. Obviously, this is a first step in informing Altaïr of his blind acceptance of the idea that he is fighting for what is right, and how his pride blinds him to the perspectives of his rivals. This is a fitting start to a journey of self-reflection in the context of Altaïr's work. Altaïr returns to the Rafiq, who tells Altaïr how much he respects him and feels like the current reputation he has with the Brotherhood is not valid. In this way, he is the personality that strokes Altaïr's pride and looks at his skill more than his character. Altaïr throws back a childish response, saying that he does not care what others think. This is an obvious lie in the face of his current need to prove himself, and a way to feel in control despite being a servant of the assassins and their leader. This lack of power is confirmed immediately when he goes back to Al-Mu'allim and is given a talking to about how issues arose beforehand because Altaïr knew more than he needed to and didn't follow orders. His identity still has much room to be determined, and until then, he must learn from more assassinations. The next city Altaïr travels to is Acre, a coastal city in western Galilee that has been ravaged and overtaken by the Christian Crusaders. He meets up with the Rafiq named Jabal, who is an older man. This character acts as a voice of encouragement, and one who actually listens to Altaïr's perspective. He often sounds like he will give guidance when needed, but can acknowledge Altaïr's good ideas as well. He is a voice of experience and wisdom, and a more balanced energy for Altaïr to bounce off of. Jabal has a healthy respect for the plans of the enemy, and encourages Altaïr through an acknowledgement of his next target's actions to have some as well. Speaking of the next target, Altaïr pays a visit to the hospital of Garnier de Naples, a man accused of taking patients against their will and keeping them under his control. We find a frightened patient trying to flee upon arrival, who is recaptured and brought before Garnier. Garnier speaks of how he cannot help the man if he runs, and the man responds by saying that his help involves compromising the souls of his patients. The patient says he will run again, to which Garnier responds by having the man's legs broken. The vibe is definitely one of oppression, despite Garnier's soft, apologetic tone of voice. After Altaïr puts down our seemingly mad doctor, Garnier's first thoughts and questions is, what will become of his children, aka the people he cares for? Altaïr responds by calling his patients experiments, who can return home now. Garnier then explains that these people have no home, and were on the fringes of society, with few options for life. Garnier wished to save the minds of broken people, a task he said was harder after losing the treasure that the assassins stole. Altaïr is faced not only with a man who has strong beliefs, but with the possibility that his own beliefs might be the ones getting in the way of peace. The man who appeared to be mistreated might have been a mental case, in need of structure and care. Now the only doctor that would deal with such a man is dead, at the hands of the man whose justifications are that his master told him that this man was evil and doing evil to others. This plants more seeds of doubt, even deeper into the mind of our main character. Jabal helps Altaïr rationalize his thoughts by asking him what he objectively saw.
Is that what you saw?
No. What I saw was not a place of healing, but of pain.
Jabal helps Altaïr to trust his senses more than words, a lesson he will need for becoming the man he is growing into. Al-Mualim rationalizes Garnier's tactics even more by telling Altaïr that drugs and manipulation led many of his patients to view him as a positive figure in their lives, and that ultimately it was more about control for Garnier than helping people. Altaïr, still focused on redemption, is able to trust that he is on the right side of things, and continues his work. But there is now a counter-rationale that he has been presented with that will add more questions than have been answered. The next contract takes you to Jerusalem, the holy city at the center of the Crusader conflict. The bureau leader here is none other than our old pal Malik, who is ever critical of Altaïr, knowing his flaws all too well. Malik has lost his arm as a result of the attack, and is a blunt voice to challenge Altaïr's character at every turn.
Al-Mualim has asked.
Ask that you perform some menial task in an effort to redeem yourself. So be out with it.
Tell me what you can about the one they call Talal.
It is your duty to locate and assassinate the man, Altaïr, not mine.
You'd do well to assist me. His death benefits the entire land.
Do you deny his death benefits you as well?
Such things do not concern you.
Your actions very much concern me.
He confronts Altaïr's motives for going on these contracts, telling him he is looking to benefit his status more than the will of the Creed. He tells you of info regarding the next target, Talal, but only in duty to the Brotherhood. The wounds are still fresh, and both men must grow together in order to gain a more balanced and less emotional perspective of each other. We find Talal, but are ambushed in the process. Before we confront him, we see him holding many enslaved people to transport. When we do the deed, his justifications are largely the same as Garnier, claiming to help the people he holds captive.
Beggars, whores, addicts, lepers. Do they strike you as proper slaves? Unfit for even the most menial tasks? No. I took them not to sell, but to save. And yet you'd kill us all.
Talal does, however, differentiate himself by calling Altaïr out directly for only acting out of obedience and not personal conviction. Altaïr deflects once again, claiming these men are in it for profit and selfish gain. Talal then speaks of the irony of his statement, subconsciously planting doubt in the motives of the assassins. Upon returning to Malik, Altaïr is given a reminder of discretion after alarming the whole city of his assassination. It is clear that Malik is looking for any way to criticize Altaïr, because of how he has been wronged. But he is also reminding us that Altaïr is still not valuing the tenets of the Creed more than the pride of completing a task by any means necessary. The three initial assassinations all highlight three men with personal convictions about their moral actions. What they were doing might have been part of a larger collaboration, but each of them had the drive to make sure something was done about it, no matter the cost. They collectively teach Altaïr that personal drive is not just based on emotional instinct, but rational justification of the correctness of one's course of action. From here we see Altaïr becoming more of his own man. But in order to explore this, we must move on to one of the biggest motivators for many men to take action. We return to Damascus for the first of our next 3 contracts. Here we are sent to kill Abu al-Nuqad, a lavish elitist hosting a party. Abu gives a speech, while giving a toast, speaking of how judgmental the people before him are, and how justifications of funding their sides of the Holy War conflict are what keep people from living in peace. The toast was only a means of poisoning all of his guests with the wine, in order to get rid of religious perspectives and tribal divisions. We learn when Abul is taken to the ground that he makes this power play because he cannot fund a war that appeals to a god that would call him an abomination. Obviously, between this statement being made in the cultural context of Abrahamic religions and his reference to people's judgment of him, we can surmise that Abul is a homosexual. After being questioned for his deeds by Altaïr, Abul compares himself with the assassin.
Is it so different from your own work? You take the lives of men and women, strong in the conviction that their deaths will improve the lots of those left behind.
He states that both of them kill to make the world a better place, with better perspectives, and that Altaïr is a hypocrite for thinking any less of him for his actions. When Altaïr returns to his mentor to speak of how each man has justified their actions with no regret, Al-Mu'allim says something very interesting.
There is a difference, Altaïr, between what we are told to be true and what we see to be true. Most men do not bother to make the distinction.
This is a direct reference to our protagonist, and Altaïr glosses over it entirely. To be fair, Al-Mu'allim does qualify the statement by saying,
"It is also your duty to still these thoughts and trust in your master."
It gives our main character the feeling of thinking for himself, without the application. This is a trademark of ideological control, making the rules and making your followers think it was their idea. Holy books come in particular clutch for this. Al-Mu'allim justifies this statement by saying there can be no peace without order, which ironically is exactly what the mentality of the Templars is. Altaïr realizes the paradox and tells his master that he speaks in circles, and then follows up with,
"You commend me for being aware, then ask me not to be. Which is it?"
The question will be answered when you no longer need to ask it.
This is actually true. Once Altaïr gains the wisdom to think for himself, he will be able to decide what is right. Interestingly, this is where the student learns to think like the master, and move towards even more maturity. We end up back with Malik in Jerusalem, planning the takedown of Mahad ad-Din, a powerful warlord that has taken control of the city in the absence of Talal. We see Altaïr's growth in his respect for Malik, as he asks him for help on his approach. Obviously, Malik's rebuke about stealth was taken to heart. Malik acts surprised, but intrigued that Altaïr would humble himself like this, when they have been so at odds. I believe that Malik being so forward about his issues with Altaïr's past choices, and his victimhood as a result of it, make him the perfect person for Altaïr to actually respect and listen to, though. It is truly an image of brotherhood, and makes the Assassin Brotherhood feel like a real community when they interact. They hold each other accountable because of their different perspectives, and this helps both of them grow to trust each other. It is arguably the best view into Altaïr's character change, and a brilliantly written dynamic. I feel like Altaïr would not grow if it weren't for Malik, and I appreciate that his presence is there throughout the game. After looking for clues as to his target's whereabouts, Altaïr finds himself watching Mahad ad-Din perform a public execution of a diverse group of people. Unlike the other targets, ad-Din is not interested in moral justification for his actions. He states blatantly that his true desire was for power over the lives of anyone he could manage. He wanted to feel like a god, and he tells Altaïr that he would do the same if he could. In a fascinating and honest response, Altaïr actually admits that at one point he would, but the reason he would not now is because he learns of what happens to people that elevate themselves above others. He then shows the man this lesson by stabbing him in the neck. Between his own public execution and the lives of the men that he has taken thus far, Altaïr has learned that his pride has been the source of his conflict, and that listening to and respecting others is key to gaining wisdom and insight. We truly have come to a level of manhood compared to the boyish arrogance we started our story with. Altaïr comes back to Malik expecting criticism for something, but Malik has none. Malik tells him that he did his duty, No more, no less. Malik says that Altaïr expecting praise for simply doing his job troubles him. Altaïr responds by saying, "Everything I do seems to trouble you." Malik tells him to reflect on that, showing that while Altaïr has grown, he still is seeking approval more than doing things out of conviction and a belief in the creed. Malik is right to be uneasy, because in some ways Altaïr is still a boy doing a man's job, not taking full moral responsibility for his choices. This, however, inspires Altaïr to make the choice to demand answers from his master. He gives Al-Mu'allim an ultimatum that if he does not explain what ideas make up the creed of his targets, that he will not be an instrument for death anymore.
Each man I'm sent to kill speaks cryptic words to me. Each time I come to you and ask for answers. Each time you give only riddles in exchange, but no more.
Who are you to say no more?
Al-Mu'allim reminds him that he must tread carefully if he wishes to reclaim his lost honor. Altaïr responds with a harsh tone that it was not lost, but stolen by his master, and that he has been sent out to fetch it like a dog. Altaïr ignores the threats of his master to find another to take his place, and reminds him of what he told him previously. The answer would come when he no longer needed to ask. So he demands an answer, noticing Altaïr's determination and needing to appease his best man. Al-Mu'allim tells him that all his targets are Templars, under the control of his rival, Robert de Sable. The master goes on to say that these men seek control not in the name of God, or for the sake of people, but for themselves. Altaïr retaliates by asking why the truth was held from him. His teacher responds to him by saying it was a more valuable experience to find answers on his own through experience, and that information learned is better than information told. He also remarks that Altaïr's mentality did not warrant the responsibility of said information. Altaïr accepts this, and due to his newfound maturity, is able to rationalize the answer, rather than emotionally respond to it. He is gaining the once lacking wisdom both Malik and Al-Mu'allim have pointed out. William de Montferrat is Altaïr's next target.
William of Montferrat is my target. What can you tell me of the man himself?
William has been named regent while the king conducts his war. The people see it as a strange choice given the history between Richard and William's son Conrad. But I think Richard rather clever for it.
Clever how?
Richard and Conrad do not see eye to eye on most matters. Though they are civil enough in public, there are whispers that each intends evil upon the other. And then there was that business with Akkar's captured Saracens. In its wake, Conrad has returned to Tyre, and Richard has compelled William to remain here as his guest.
You mean his hostage?
Whatever you wish to call it.
Altaïr claims that he has never been one for politics, but Jabal responds by saying all his assassinations are political in nature, and that Altaïr is, in that way, a politician himself. This bit of wisdom expands Altaïr's moral motives as an individual by making him reflect on the why of his actions. Altaïr's first view of William is a public scolding about his failures from King Richard.
3,000 souls, William. I was told they would be held as prisoners and used to barter for the release of our men.
The Saracens would not have honored their end of the bargain. You know this to be true. I did you a favor.
Oh, yes. A great favor indeed. Now our enemies will be that much stronger in their convictions. Fight that much harder.
I know our enemy well. They will not be emboldened, but filled with fear.
Tell me, how is it you know the intentions of our enemies so well? You who forsake the field of battle to play at politics.
I did what was right, what was just.
You swore an oath to uphold the work of God, William. But that is not what I see here. No, I see a man who's trampled it.
Your words are most unkind, my liege. I would hope I might have earned your trust by now.
You are Akkar's regent, William, set to rule in my stead. How much more trust is required? Perhaps you'd like my crown.
You missed the point!
It is obvious that tensions are high, and William is under a lot of stress. Altaïr once again takes down his target, thinking the tension between William and the king is a sign that he wishes to make Conrad the new king.
For Conrad, my son is an arse, unfit to lead his host, let alone a kingdom. And Richard, the Ancien is no better, blinded as he is by faith in the insubstantial. Acre does not belong to either of them.
Then who?
The city belongs to its people.
Altaïr continues by accusing him of abusing the people, by withholding resources and harshly disciplining them. Like many targets before him, William claims all that he did was for the people, to prepare them for a life under new leadership, and to ration resources for lean times. In his dying moments, he tells Altaïr that his confidence in liberating the people in this way will probably not bear the fruit that he is thinking it will, but instead will damn the city to future chaos. This food for thought, along with the last two contracts, makes Altaïr ask Al-Mualim a question. Altaïr states that each of these men were put in place to aid their leaders, but instead chose to betray them. He inquires as to why that is. Al-Mualim simply states that it is so that the Templar Order can control the regions they are given power over, but he continues by saying that they don't have the tool that they need to exercise that power. This is the first time Al-Mualim presents the piece of Eden that was taken from Solomon's temple. Altaïr sees nothing but a silver ball, but his master claims that it is temptation itself. It was the fruit that tempted Adam and Eve. It was what Moses used for all his miracles in Egypt. Ares used it to begin the Trojan War, and Jesus Christ himself turned water into wine with it. Now Altaïr has been exposed to a great truth in the Assassin's Creed universe. The power of God that this crusade had been waged over is not a divine power, but a technology that has been harnessed by mankind. The one who holds this treasure can control the hearts and minds of whoever looks on it. Now it is clear what these Templars were doing. The first three targets were creating, supplying, and equipping drugs to simulate this phenomenon, and the next three gathered people to use as puppets of war. Altaïr now has the info to drive his conviction as a member of the Assassins. But more than that, he has the perspective of his enemies. These last three men had a desire for power over people that drove their personal convictions even further than the goals of the Templars as a collective. This is what distinguishes Altaïr's creed from theirs. The Assassin's ultimate goal is for peace via the free will of men. Liberty is Altaïr's goal in his own personal search for answers, but also in his motivation to end the lives of these men who would decide the fate of the world for themselves. He is still under the control of leadership, but he has a why, and that is good enough for him at this juncture. But now, Altaïr must learn even more about what he values and believes, but this time as his own man. Once again, we are off to find our next target, a soldier named Sibrand. Sibrand is a fearful man. We find him paranoid of his own men and worried about Altaïr's mission. He knows his life is in danger, just as all the other Templars' lives have been, and he surrounds himself with heavy security. He makes an example out of a priest, accusing him of being a conspirer in disguise, and he kills him publicly. The clearer Altaïr's mission is to his enemies, the more they fall apart. This confirms that Altaïr is ultimately rooting his identity in something that is a very effective force. He is becoming a man with a purpose, as the creed becomes his very reputation. After taking down Sibrand, Altaïr asks him why he fears going to his god.
I know what waits for me. For all of us.
If not your god, then what?
Nothing. Nothing waits. And that is what I fear.
Sibrand states that the treasure that was stolen was the proof to him that this life is all we have and that acts of God are an illusion. He then elaborates on his role as the leader of the blockade, so that the kings of the world could not establish an order of faith in the Holy Land. Altaïr speaks of how freeing the world of faith is just an attempt to control the minds and wills of others in a different way, and act comparable with the religious orders. This communicates further to us that Altaïr has embraced that nothing is true, but everything is permitted. This is his conviction, just as controlling the minds of men is Sibrand's. Sibrand ends his life by saying, "I follow my orders, believing in my cause, same as you," a fitting phrase to show that they are two sides of the same coin. Altaïr's understanding of his side of the coin is spelled out in more detail when Al-Mualim asks him a question.
What is the truth?
We place faith in ourselves. We see the world the way it really is, and hope that one day all mankind might see the same.
What is the world, then?
An illusion. One which we can either submit to, as most do, or transcend.
What is it to transcend?
To recognize nothing is true and everything is permitted. That laws arise not from divinity but reason.
Altaïr then states what highlights his growth into manhood.
I understand now that our creed does not command us to be free. It commands us to be wise.
Altaïr has embraced that liberty has consequences, and that we have to bend to the will of the collective consciousness. Deciding the truth for oneself, and extending that right to all men, takes a nuanced approach to navigating the world, an approach that defends the rights of all while fighting for truth to be exposed. The last thing standing between Altaïr and Robert is a man named Jubair. Jubair is on a mission to destroy all of the authoritative written knowledge in Damascus. Like Sabrand, he wishes to force people to embrace the knowledge catered to them by the Templars, and is leading a campaign to burn as many authoritative books as possible in the city. We find him being confronted by one of his men, a man making the case for the guidance that these texts provide. However, Jubair is convinced that these are lies, leading people astray and keeping them from seeing the world as it is. He rewards the man trying to defend this knowledge by burning him alive alongside his precious books. Yet another act of fear by a Templar demanding control. When Altaïr takes him down, he lectures him on the need for men to choose their own beliefs, and that teaching them knowledge is the only true way to change minds. Jubair retorts by stating that he is a source of information with whom Altaïr disagrees as well. He follows this up with,
"Is it not ancient scrolls that inspire the Crusaders, that fill Salah ad-Din and his men with a sense of righteous fury? Their texts endanger others, bring death in their wake. I too was making a small sacrifice."
Both men are making in their mind a small sacrifice to create a world they wish to see. Once again, two sides of the same coin. Al-Mualim points this out to Altaïr even further by stating that Robert's goal is peace through a united world. He then says that he shares his goal, but not the means by which it is sought after.
Peace is something to be learned, to be understood, to be embraced.
The Templars' goal is to force it upon people. Therefore, Altaïr has but one goal, and that is the goal that was established in Solomon's temple, albeit more rashly. He must kill Robert des Sables. Before pursuing Robert, we must have one more conversation with Malik. This time, we get to inform him of what the meaning of things is, and what the true intentions of the Templars are.
All the men I've laid to rest have worked together, united by this man. Robert has designs upon the land. This much I know for certain. But how and why, when and where, these things remain out of reach.
Crusaders and Saracens working together?
They are none of these things, but something else. Templars.
The Templars are a part of the Crusader army.
Or so they'd like King Richard to believe. No, their only allegiance is to Robert des Sables and some mad idea that they will stop the war.
Malik finally praises us for our clarity of seeking knowledge over revenge. Before Altaïr leaves on his mission, he apologizes to Malik for his arm, and the pride that led to it being taken from him.
Malik, before I go, there's something I should say.
Be out with it.
I've been a fool.
Normally I'd make no argument, but what is this? What are you talking about?
All this time, I never told you I was sorry. Too damn proud. You lost your arm because of me. Lost Qadr. You had every right to be angry.
Malik then tells Altaïr, there is no need to apologize.
No, you don't. I do not accept your apology because you are not the same man who went with me into Solomon's temple. And so you have nothing to apologize for.
He also states that he was envious of Altaïr's skill, and that his jealousy helped to lead him to destruction. He states that victory and defeat should be shared between them as brothers. Two men at odds over a difference in mentality have become united in mind. Altaïr has grown to respect Malik's wisdom, and Malik Altaïr's growth. This is truly the best evidence we as the player can gain, comparing the beginning of this relationship to what it has become. The time has come to confront Robert. Altaïr attempts to do so at the funeral for one of the assassinated Templars, but is ambushed by the towering knight. Altaïr is able to get the better of him, only to realize that it is not a him at all, but a woman disguised as Robert. She tells Altaïr that his assassinations have unified multiple sects together to join the Templars in bringing the fight to the assassins, and that he is too late to save his precious brotherhood. Altaïr decides to spare her, seeing as she is not his target. Malik tells him he must return to Masyaf to gain his master's approval to act. Altaïr suspects there is something his master has not told him, This makes sense, considering the comparison that Al-Mualim just made with Robert and himself. Altaïr appeals to Malik's perceptiveness, telling him to listen to people in the city for understanding of the coming conflict. With no time to question Al-Mualim, Altaïr heads to Al-Sayf to find Robert and his army. When Altaïr arrives before King Richard and de Sable, he tries to be diplomatic, telling Richard of the traitor in his midst. He explains the motives of the men who have worked with Robert and appeals to what's best for the Holy Land. Richard has trouble discerning who is worth believing, and decides to put the debate, ironically for the two humanists, in God's hands, by solving the conflict with a fight to the death. When Robert finally goes down, Altaïr's suspicions are realized. Altaïr tells Robert his schemes are over, but de Sable responds by saying that Altaïr is a puppet.
He betrayed you, boy, just as he betrayed me.
Speak sense, Templar, or not at all.
9 men he sent you to kill, yes? The 9 who guarded the treasure's secret.
What of it?
It wasn't 9 who found the treasure, assassin. Not 9, but 10.
A 10th? None may live who carry the secret. Give me his name.
Oh, but you know him well. And I doubt very much you'd take his life as willingly as you've taken mine.
Who?
It is your master, Al-Mualim.
Al-Mualim, not simply the master of assassins, but the master of lies. A Templar pretending to care about the values Altaïr has grown to embrace. Values that now constitute Altaïr's new identity. We return to Masyaf, running into many assassins under the spell of our deceptive master. Altaïr must cut down brothers and peers in an attempt to stop him. Luckily, there are a few with their senses, led by Malik, to help you. Malik tells of his journey back to Solomon's temple, and how Robert left a journal there revealing all. Malik is heartbroken, but glad the truth has been revealed, and that he could help his true creed-minded brother. Malik and the men with him hold off the mind-controlled assassins as Altaïr enters the fortress to end this game. Al-Mualim meets Altaïr with a glowing telekinetic hold over his body. He mocks him with statements about his tendencies to be a disobedient student. Altaïr's strong will and questions are what keep him going, though. He asks his former master a very valid question.
Why are you doing this?
I found proof.
Proof of what?
That nothing is true, and everything is permitted.
After a fight with many projected enemies, Al-Mualim holds Altaïr in a bind state once again, asking if he has any final words. Altaïr spits,
"You lied to me, called Robert's goal foul, and all along it was yours as well."
I've never been much good at sharing.
The whole point of the Assassin's Creed is to share the freedom that leads to individual enlightenment. And now we see the selfishness and need for power clearly. Altaïr's entire character being scoffed at by the man that taught him its value. Altaïr says,
"Others will find the strength to stand against you."
And this is why, so long as men maintain free will, there can be no peace.
I killed the last man who spoke as such.
The two men at a moral impasse have to resolve this conflict somehow. Al-Mualim tries to reason his perspective more by pointing out that his method of control is less violent than the creeds and the religious perspectives of the world. He tells Altaïr that because the strength of his convictions were linked with his actions, he could not control his mind, and that he needed him to kill the men that were standing in the way of his singular control. This proves that the will is more powerful than the enforced thought. Ironically, Al-Mualim respects Altaïr for it, and says he was his best student. As a result, he lets him duel him, and lets him live out his convictions, just as he had previously taught him. Inevitably, Altaïr's strong motivation leads to a final success, and he puts his master down. The old man accepts defeat, and tells Altaïr the power is his now. Altaïr says,
"You held fire in your hand, old man. It should have been destroyed."
Destroy the only thing capable of ending the Crusades and creating true peace? Never.
Then I will.
But his master knows what is in store for him, and passes on doubt of his ability to resist. We end Altaïr's story with him approaching the Peace of Eden, as the voice of Al-Mu'allim quotes King Solomon from the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 17 and 18.
I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also was a chasing after wind, for in much wisdom is much grief. And he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow.
The ironic thing about the creed is that knowledge and wisdom are its driving factors. The paradox of choice leads one to a consistent need for justification of said choice. Altaïr has grown to value the need for personal growth through knowledge, and to the application of knowledge. Al-Mu'allim chose to apply the knowledge given to him in a way that enslaved the will of others. Altaïr will not do this out of conviction, but he is still presented with an opportunity to understand the world and undo the truths of the world, to be permitted to do as he wills. The Peace of Eden exposes a globe of the world to Altaïr. He is presented with a whole new understanding to discover. New madness, new sorrows, and more chasing after the wind. This is, after all, the point of a life of liberty. This is the point of growing up and becoming a man with personal responsibility. This is the point of maturity. Al-Mu'allim's voice asks Altaïr,
Destroy it! Destroy it as you said you would.
I can't.
Yes, you can, Altaïr. But you won't.
This is truly Altaïr's final test in his growth journey, from prideful student to the master of his own fate, to ask himself the question, in the most real way he can, what do I do with the expanding knowledge and wisdom I gain, when I know that in my limited understanding and my experience as a human, nothing is true, and everything is permitted. Thank you all for listening to my interpretation of Altaïr's character development. I absolutely love the character depth of the early Assassin's Creed game protagonists, as well as the commentary and real-world parallels that these games present. If you got something out of this breakdown, leave a like, it would be most appreciated. If you find my thoughts interesting, feel free to subscribe for future outpourings of my thoughts and feelings about games and their stories. Let me know what you personally got out of Altaïr's journey in the comments section below. And thank you for coming to the Dutch Ritz party.